The Nautilus slipped beneath the ink-black surface just after midnight, its sleek hull cutting through the frigid waters of the Pacific kelp fringe like a silent ghost. Inside the cramped control room, Dr. Elena Reyes watched the depth gauge tick downward, 10 meters, then 20, her eyes flicking between the instrument panel's soft green glow and the forward viewport, where tendrils of giant kelp drifted by, phosphorescent copepods clinging to their edges like flecks of emerald light. Commander Mateo Silva sat at the pilot console, his hands steady on the dual joysticks. "We're at 35 meters and holding," he announced, voice calm but taut. The hum of the electric thrusters vibrated through the cabin, the only sound beside the rhythmic beeping of the sonar. Suddenly, a low metallic groan reverberated through the bulkheads, an unsettling sound that did not belong to the engine's steady pulse. Elena's heart clenched. "Did you hear that?" she asked, swiveling in her seat. Mateo's brow furrowed as he replayed the sonar log. "Unscheduled pressure spike in the starboard bulkhead," he said, tapping his headset. "Amina, you there?" Deep in the engine compartment, engineer Amina Khalid's voice crackled over the intercom. "Thrusters 1 and 2 are offline," she reported, breath visible in the turbine room's cold air. "Leaks in the hydraulic lines. Can't regain control." A hush fell. The Nautilus shuddered as it drifted, kelp swaying past the darkened viewport. Below, bioluminescent plankton pulsed in the water, their soft green glimmer the only sign of life in the abyssal silence. "We're dead in the water," Elena whispered, swallowing. She tapped the emergency lights, bathing the control room in a dim red glow. "Battery backup's limited. Estimates say we have 6 hours of reserve power before total blackout." Outside, the kelp forest pressed close, its long blades brushing the sub's silvery skin. The crew's unease grew with each passing minute. Then, through the gloom, came a sudden flare of light. Elena yelped, stumbling toward the viewport. 5 dark shapes glided into view, breaking the water's surface in a graceful arc. Each orca carried the faint, ghostly glow of disturbed bioluminescence around its flukes, flashes like living lanterns in the midnight sea. The first flare pulsed, SLAP. Then a pause. Slap. Then again. Slap. "The pod's signaling us," Mateo breathed, awe softening his voice. He tapped the helm overrides, coaxing the auxiliary thrusters back to life. "Follow their fluke flares," he ordered. Elena keyed the intercom. "Amina, initiate secondary thrusters. Set maximum thrust to 5%. Below, the engineer's reply crackled. "Underway on auxiliary, maintaining minimal draw." As the sub lurched forward, Mateo matched its speed to the Orcas, their luminous flukes tracing a winding channel through the kelp's dark maze. Every slap swept aside shadow, revealing submerged ridges and passageways invisible to instruments. Elena's fingers danced over the sonar grid, marking waypoints where the flares glowed brightest, natural corridors safe from hidden pinnacles. Inside the Nautilus, hope flickered like the Orca's own bioluminescent trails. Elena pressed her palm to the cold viewport, whispering, "Thank you." And outside, the pod of Orcas, those midnight sentinels, continued their silent vigil, steering the lost sub through nature's uncharted waterways, each tail slap a guiding beacon in the void. As the Nautilus trailed the pod's fluke flares through the kelp forests, their own distress call, sent via emergency transponder, echoed up through the water column to awaiting rescue teams on Kelp Coast Station. At the station's communications hub, sonar technician Priya Malhotra watched the blinking Mayday beacon flash across her console. Without hesitation, she keyed the intercom. "Commander Briggs, we have an active emergency transponder from Nautilus, bearing location coordinates 34.112 degrees north, 120.456 degrees west. Last ping at 0052 hours. Commander Briggs, a veteran of numerous at-sea rescues, rose from his desk and barked orders. "Launch the Seahawk immediately. Deploy the ROV team and surface support vessels. We move in 10 minutes. In the submersible hangar, the rescue submarine Seahawk, a larger, more specialized vessel equipped with remote-operated vehicle, ROV bays, sprang to life. Technicians in fluorescent overalls loaded packs of spare hull panels, hydraulic seals, and emergency life support kits into stainless steel lockers. Electricians ran final diagnostics on the Seahawk's high-frequency sonar arrays, while the ROV pilots calibrated deep-water manipulator arms. On the deck of the mothership, surface vessels cut their mooring lines as spotlights snapped on. Crews boarded inflatable rescue boats, bristling with floodlights, thermal cameras, and diver cages. Each boat's captain received hand-drawn charts of the kelp fringe, annotated with the Orca's last observed location and the Nautilus's beacon coordinates. Back in the Nautilus, Elena Reyes peered through the viewport, tracking the glowing Orcas as they steered the sub along a winding ravine. Mateo Silva leaned close, voice tight with hope. They know the way. If we can just hold power until we reach deeper water, he said half to himself. Elena nodded, running her fingers over the manual ballast controls, prepared to jettison weight if necessary. Below deck, Amina Khalid monitored power reserves. Auxiliary thrusters holding at 10% draw, she reported. But we're burning through battery faster than predicted. On Kelp Coast Station's control deck, Priya Malhotra watched the sub's forward sonar screen. She saw the Orca-lit pathway mapped in glowing green contours. Drawing a steady breath, she radioed the Rescue Coordination Center. Seahawk, you have clear sonar vectors. Follow the pod's corridor and prepare for hull patch delivery upon rendezvous. Outside, the night sea boiled under the chase lights as rescue vessels fanned out toward the kelp fringe. Seahawk's deck crew winched the ROV over the side and guided its slender form into the inky depths, its cameras flickering as they followed the same luminous corridor. 4 rescue boats zipped along the surface, their sonar echoes bouncing off hidden outcrops as spotlights traced the kelp canopy like search beams in a midnight forest. Back in the Nautilus, hope and anxiety warred in the cramped control room. Then, the familiar pulse of bioluminescence glowing brighter through the viewport, a cluster of Orcas surged ahead, their flukes slashing open a final clearing. Mateo steadied the helm. Here, he said, voice steady. Deeper water and less hull stress. Elena engaged the last of her thruster power, and the sub slid into a broad channel. Amina exhaled in relief as battery consumption eased. Above them, through sonar and ROV relays, rescue teams converged. The Seahawk's robotic arm extended a patching kit to the sub's starboard hull, locked in place by heavy-duty clamps. Surface vessels threw lines for emergency transfer, and divers prepared to swim alongside once the sub reached the rendezvous zone. Inside the Nautilus, Elena and Mateo exchanged a look of fierce gratitude as the Orcas circled overhead, their tail flares dancing like living lighthouses. Stay with us a little longer, Elena whispered to them. And in that silent communion between human and whale, the crew knew they would not see dawn alone. As the Nautilus glided deeper into the kelp forest's shadowy embrace, its lights sputtered and held, casting trembling beams across swaying fronds that fluttered like silent banners. Outside the viewport, the pod of Orcas led the way with unwavering grace and purpose. Each mighty tail slap sent a bioluminescent blossom rippling through the water, guiding the submarine through a labyrinth of jagged ridges and hidden pinnacles that no chart could have revealed. Inside the control room, the tension was a living thing. Elena Reyes pressed her forehead against the cool glass, eyes tracing the luminous arcs. At her side, Commander Mateo Silva monitored the sonar, plotting every flash's bearing and distance. Behind them, Engineer Amina Khalid kept watch on the power meters, her knuckles white where she gripped the console edge. We're down to 15% battery, Amina announced in a measured voice. The ballast motors will only operate for another 10 minutes at this drain rate. Mateo swallowed. Then we must reach open channel before that. He keyed the comms mic. Seahawk, how close are you? A crisp reply crackled through the hull. 40 meters and closing. ROV ready to deploy patches. Elena exhaled, nodding to Mateo. Keep steady on their wake. They know where deeper water lies. Outside, the Orcas slowed their procession as the water beneath grew darker and deeper. The kelp forest gave way to open seabeds strewn with rolling sand waves. The whales formed a loose semicircle around the Nautilus, their bioluminescent tail slaps now pulsing in rapid, confident succession, guiding both the sub and the rescue ROVs that flickered into view behind them. From the dorsal hatch, twin ROVs emerged, their manipulator arms poised with emergency patching compounds. Operators aboard the Seahawk guided them forward through tethered lines. In perfect synchrony, the Orcas signaled with two quick slaps, then a sustained third, marking the final rendezvous point. With the Nautilus held steady by aft thrusters, the ROVs closed in on the starboard breach. One carried a flexible metal patch, the other, a polymer sealant. As the ROV's camera lights swept across the jagged tear, Elena could feel every heartbeat in her chest. Then, like dancers in a synchronized ballet, the ROVs snapped the patch into place, clamped it tight, and injected sealant into the fissure's edges. A sudden roar of relief surged through the sub's hull as the breach sealed. Water pressure normalized, thrusters hummed back to life, and the power meter's needle crept slowly back towards safe territory. Outside the viewport, the Orcas paused, their eyes reflecting the sub's green glow. Then, as one, they slipped away into the midnight blue, leaving the Nautilus and its crew free to ascend toward the waiting surface fleet. Inside, Commander Silva tapped Elena's shoulder. "They saved us, Dr. Reyes. We wouldn't have made it without them." Elena nodded, voice quivering with awe. "They're true guardians of these waters." She raised her hand to the viewport, imagining the Orcas, hearing her silent thanks. Moments later, the Nautilus powered upward, its path lit by the Seahawk's searchlights and the flash of rescue craft above. As the submarine broke the surface, its battered crew emerged blinking into the starry night. Cold, weary, but alive. Behind them, in the depths of kelp and bioluminescent glow, the Orcas resumed their patrol, their Fluke flares a solemn lighthouse for all who dared venture into the ocean's dark heart. The Nautilus broke the surface with a gentle pitch, its bow rising through the phosphorescent wake that clung to the hull like stardust. Captain Mateo Silva triggered the emergency hatch release, and the crew, pale, wet, and wide-eyed, climbed the narrow ladder into the clammy night air. Above them, rescue boats drifted in a protective semicircle, floodlights cutting through the darkness in golden cones that picked out every corrugated wave. Dr. Elena Reyes emerged last, her lab coat soaked, but her face alight with relief. She cupped her hands around her mouth to call down to the rescue teams. "We're safe," she shouted, her voice raw but triumphant. "The Orcas guided us through." On deck, engineer Amina Khalid's laughter rang out as she was embraced by a diver in a dry suit, while the sonar technician Priya Malhotra collapsed into the arms of her fellow station crew, tears mingling with sea spray. Commander Briggs, the operations overseer, stepped forward and raised his megaphone. "All crews, stand down. The Nautilus and her crew are secure. Prepare recovery procedures." As rescue boats closed in, Elena pointed toward the dark horizon, where distant flashes of bioluminescence marked the departing pod of Orcas. Each tail slap had drawn luminous arcs that etched a living map for the stranded sub, a gift beyond all human reckoning. Mateo joined her at the rail, nodding in solemn gratitude. "We owe them our lives," he said quietly. On board the command ship, Seahawk ROV pilots watched live feeds of the Orca's retreating silhouettes. Pilot Louis Nakamura toggled the brightness on his display. "Look at that," he murmured. "They linger, as if ensuring we make it back." Meanwhile, surface vessels maneuvered to escort the Nautilus into the floating dry dock moored nearby. Mechanics and medical teams readied stretchers and patch kits, their training meeting the extraordinary reality of a submarine saved by whales. Elena stepped down to the deck of the command ship to address the assembled crews. "I stand before you because a pod of Orcas, creatures we study, admire, and often misunderstand, became our rescuers in the depths. Their Fluke flares lit our path when our instruments failed. We must learn from them, honor them, and protect the ocean that binds us all." As the crews cheered, A hush fell when the Orca's final flares appeared on the horizon, pulsing once in steady farewell before vanishing beneath the waves. In that moment, human and whale shared a silent accord, a bond forged in crisis and sealed by unspoken understanding. Under spotlights and murmurs of awe, the Nautilus drifted toward safety, her hull patched and her spirits renewed. Behind her, the ocean's midnight guardians swam on, silent sentinels guiding all who dare explore the deep, their fluke flares echoing in human hearts long after the night's rescue had become legend. Weeks after the Nautilus's miraculous rescue, its crew returned to land as heroes, but none more so than the pod of Orcas, whose fluke flares had guided them through the abyss. At Kelp Coast Station, a debriefing filled the auditorium. Scientists, naval officers, and marine mammal experts crowded the seats, eager for first-hand accounts. Dr. Elena Reyes stepped to the microphone, her voice steady as she replayed the subs log. Instruments failed us. We were drifting in unknown waters when the Orcas appeared, their bioluminescent tail slaps mapping a safe corridor. Each flash cut through 10 meters of darkness, revealing ridges and passages hidden to sonar. They led us to shallower trenches, then paused to ensure we followed, before fading into the kelp forest's night. Questions came fast. Had the pod acted out of curiosity, altruism, or instinct? Could this behavior be observed in other cetacean populations? Dr. Priya Malhotra, the station's lead bioacoustician, presented spectrograms of the orca fluke slaps, 3 precise pulses, each separated by half-second pauses, matching the subcrew's accounts. This pattern is unprecedented, she said. It suggests intentional signaling, an SOS beacon from the whales themselves. Meanwhile, Commander Briggs announced plans for a new oceanic beacon initiative, pairing submarine expeditions with trained orca observers. Specialized ROVs would record whale movement patterns, while vessel crews learned to interpret fluke slap sequences as navigational cues. The initiative would also fund tagging and acoustic monitoring, ensuring that the guiding pods were protected from shipping lanes and naval tests. Despite the flurry of scientific activity, Elena found her thoughts drifting back to that midnight corridor, each flash of light, each hush of hope. She returned often to the station's observation deck, watching for the faint glimmer of whale bioluminescence in the night tides. Late one evening, as a soft drizzle fell, she saw it, a low arc of phosphorescence beyond the breakers. Heart pounding, she whispered, "Thank you," knowing the ocean's guardians still watched over her and all who ventured into their domain. In the months that followed, the Nautilus's crew trained with orca-guided exercises, learning to program submersible lights to respond to tail slap patterns, and equipping subs with underwater cameras pointed rearward, ensuring they never missed another guiding flash. Conferences across the globe featured keynote speakers recounting the kelp fringe rescue. Artists painted murals of luminous orcas under moonlit seas, and school children gifted care packages to marine sanctuaries, inscribed with the motto, "Follow the Flash." At Kelp Coast Station's Shoreline Memorial, where a bronze plaque bore the Nautilus's crest and the orcapod's silhouette, Elena, Commander Silva, and Engineer Khalid stood in quiet tribute. Their fingers brushed the cool metal as they recalled the crisis that had brought them to the brink and the sentient whales who had pulled them back. Above them, waves whispered against kelp stalks, and somewhere in the deep, a pod's fluke flares pulsed in time with human gratitude, a living beacon in the endless night, echoing across the deep. In the weeks following the Nautilus's miraculous return, Kelp Coast Station became a hive of activity as scientists, engineers, and mariners scrambled to capture every lesson the orcapod had taught. Under the phosphorescent glow of bioluminescent plankton at the edge of the kelp fringe, Elena Reyes and Commander Silva convened nightly workshops in the aquaculture dome, sharing raw footage of fluke flares and mapping the precise coordinates at which each guiding pulse had appeared. Their walls were plastered with sonar charts overlaid by whale silhouettes, the digital echoes of tail slaps traced in luminous green lines that cut a safe passage through otherwise impassable reefs. Soldiers from the Navy's Marine Mammal Unit, joined marine mammal researchers to develop listening protocols. They taught submarine crews to recognize the orca's three-beat signature, not as background noise, but as an intentional beacon. Underwater, new hydrophone arrays were calibrated to pick up every subtle bass of a tail hitting the current. Above, ship decks were outfitted with strobe-sensitive cameras designed to catch any flash of bioluminescence that might ripple from a pod's fluke. Even the smallest coastal fishing charters received waterproof guides, laminated cards illustrating the orca's pattern, and advising skippers to pause, follow the flashes, and avoid aggressive maneuvers that might scatter the pod. On moonlit nights, Elena led volunteer orca pilots into small submersibles specially retrofitted with rear-mounted floodlights. These pilots rehearsed the rescue corridor, following pre-recorded fluke flare sequences through the kelp maze, while ROVs simulated hull breaches. Each exercise ended with a silent moment. The sub would roll to neutral buoyancy and drift, awaiting the next trio of slaps before it could continue. Slowly, what had begun as an emergency response became a standard navigational tool. Even local communities reaped the benefits. Whale watch operators learned to time their night tours alongside known orca migration patterns, inviting guests to witness living beacons in action, tiny sparks of light dancing along powerful flukes. Artisans carved elephant ivory substitute sculptures shaped like orca tails, draped with LED lights that pulsed at the same half-second intervals, a tangible reminder of nature's precise design. Schoolchildren composed songs to the rhythm slap, 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 and communities held lantern festivals echoing the whale's luminous signals, weaving human celebration into the orca's nocturnal ballet. As spring's calm waters replaced winter's storms, the Orca-guided alliance stood as a testament to interspecies cooperation. The once unthinkable notion that humans could learn to read cetacean signals had become reality. Ships traversed the kelp fringe with newfound confidence, researchers cataloged each new pod's signature, and crews carried both technical manuals and a profound respect for the ocean's oldest navigators. And in the silent depths where shadows and kelp entwined, the guiding pod continued its ancient patrol, tail flaring in the moonlit gloom, ever ready to lead any mariner brave enough to follow their living lighthouse through the midnight waters. Years passed, and the ocean's whispering kelp forests remained forever changed by that night of luminous rescue. At Kelp Coast Station, the once humble marine research outpost had grown into the global epicenter for cetacean-guided navigation. Pioneering hydrophone networks lined the continental shelf, each tagged to known orcapods, whose tail-slap signatures formed a living atlas of undersea passages. On a ritual dusk in late summer, Commander Mateo Silva returned to the observation deck that overlooked the moonlit cove. Beside him stood Dr. Elena Reyes, now director of the Oceanic Beacon Initiative, and engineer Amina Khalid, whose ROV innovations had become standard equipment on rescue submarines worldwide. They watched as whale watch boats glided past searchlights tuned to the Orca Fluke flare frequency, inviting visitors to witness the silent marvel in action. Elena held up a handheld spectrogram reader as pods of orcas breached beyond the kelp horizon. Each breach sent ripples of bioluminescence pulsing through the water, recorded as crisp three-note patterns that lit up her screen with familiar spikes. "Look," she said softly, "the Pacific Guardians are on patrol." Mateo smiled, recalling the terror of that first hull breach and the miraculous clarity of each guiding flash. "We're never truly lost again," he reflected. "Their signals are etched into every safe route and every chart we trust." Below them, the station's control room buzzed as sonar technicians rerouted incoming signals to naval and civilian vessels. Amina adjusted the calibration on a new ROV prototype, one that could detect fluke flares from 800 meters away and automatically beam that position to rescue teams. "We're refining their beacon range every season," she said. "Soon, even storm-tossed freighters will find refuge in their patterns." As the moon arced higher, a pod of juvenile orcas surfaced near the station's floating platform, their flukes rising in a synchronized salute. Each fin cast a luminous spray that glowed for a fleeting heartbeat before fading into the night. Boat crews below snapped photos, passengers gasped in awe, and scientists logged yet another successful alignment of technology and nature. Later, the trio led a commemorative ceremony in the station's amphitheater, a semicircular dock built over the kelp bed. Lanterns flickered in the breeze as Elena addressed a crowd of mariners, researchers, policymakers, and schoolchildren. What began as a desperate plea in the deep became a beacon of hope, she proclaimed. These orcas taught us that the ocean is not ours to conquer, but to listen to, and that guidance may come from the most unexpected teachers. Behind her, a commemorative mural spanned the amphitheater's wall, a swirling tableau of orca silhouettes, kelp fronds, and a ghostly outline of the Nautilus, all connected by a ribbon of phosphorescent light. At its center, a Fluke's three-beat waveform stood bold against the painted night sea. When the applause subsided, Matteo and Amina joined Elena on stage to unveil a new installation, the Guardian Beacon, a solar-powered monument surrounded by tide-worn buoys, inscribed with the names of every crew and pod involved in the Rescue Alliance. As they flipped the switch, micro-LEDs traced each buoy, and a soft slap, slap, slap echoed from hidden speakers, an eternal playback of the original SOS that had saved the Nautilus. Under the now starred sky, the crowd dispersed along the boardwalk, carried by the shared hum of gratitude. In the salt-laden air, the gentle hiss of waves reminded them that the ocean's corridors remained alive with living lighthouses, patrolling the deep. High above, beyond the kelp's reach, a lone orca breached once more, its fluke painting a fresh flare of bioluminescence across the water. In that glowing arc, the legacy of cooperation shimmered, proof that when technology and nature converge in respect and listening, even the darkest depths yield safe passage, and every wave can carry a beacon of hope.